Erwin Schrodinger is one of my heroes. He's buried here in Alpbach in Austria, standing next to his grave, where he had joined a number of physicists after World War II in 1945 to set up the European Forum and to get together to talk about peace. But he did much more than that. What he did during the uproar in the physics community after Newtonian physics was proved to be inadequate to describe quantum physics, he asked the big question that other physicists didn't ask. And that is, why is it that we were so stupid? How could we as physicists be so led astray by following Newtonian physics blindly? And what he did is he went back to the founders of modern science, as Galileo did. He went back to Euclid, to Pythagoras, to Democritus, to Archimedes, to the Ionian Greeks. They were the ones who brought the wisdom to this world by studying the entirety of the world around them, not just being focused on the physical world, but also being focused on how the physical world interacts with the spiritual world. And they were able to come up with theories that have lasted 2,500 years without question. I too went back into history and looked at these founders of science, medicine, and I found amongst them a very high level of ethics that we don't find today in general society. I wrote a long paper called A Return to the Ethics of the Ionian Greeks. And I wrote this with the idea of inspiring history teachers to throw away the old adage of studying history without an ethics background, but actually using morals and ethics to judge history and to judge the things that happen throughout history. And if you do that, you wouldn't accept some of these cultures today if they were doing the same thing. For instance, the Roman Empire was a slave empire. It was all based on slave labor. The doctors, the nurses, the teachers, they were all slaves, not just the slaves that you think about in the Colosseum, who were fighting for their lives, brutally fighting for their lives, trying to win their freedom. But everybody was a slave in that culture. And would we accept that today? No, we wouldn't. Would we follow the ethics of that culture today? I sure hope we wouldn't. But in the ethics of the Ionian Greeks, and these are the Greeks that lived between Homer and Socrates in this 800, 900 year time span, where medicine was born, where physics, science, music, they were all formed in this culture, a culture that respected women as much as men and sometimes more than men. Women were the teachers, the doctors. They took care of the country when the men had to go off and defend the country against the Persian invaders. So women were very highly regarded in this culture. Democracy was highly regarded, a true democracy. Everybody having a say in what's going on. That is how the Ionian fighters were actually able to beat the slave ships from Persia. because the ships were built in a way that each man rowing an Ionian ship could react to what he's seeing. They were up on the decks. They could see what's going on around them. They could react very quickly, as opposed to the slave ships. All the rowers were below decks under a whip, and they couldn't react as quickly. So the Ionian ships were faster. They were able to maneuver quicker, and that's how they were able to defeat an overwhelming army of slave ships. Going back to this culture, Erwin Schrodinger discovered that we had lost in modern science a holistic view of the world, a holistic view that existed at that time. And in order for us to go forward and to learn more about science, we need to understand the world as a whole. And so there's this struggle for the theory of everything today. But it's a long, long ways away, because they're trying to do a theory of everything without considering everything. And that is considering ethics and morals and spirituality in the equation. They're just talking about the material world. So having gone through this whole process myself as an adult, I realized that studying history should really be reserved for college courses or graduate courses, and shouldn't be taking place within primary schools or secondary schools. It's too complicated to study history. The first step that you need to do in studying history is understand the 360-degree view of what was happening at that time. And building this skill can be done in primary school and secondary school by looking at current events and understanding how current events are influenced by all the factors that they're influenced by, and the viewpoints of all the different cameras that are pointing at it. There we can teach our youth the tools they need later to go back in history and use those same tools to analyze what actually happened in history. Was the Roman Empire truly a great empire? Or were they just a fear-mongering power empire? And do we want to emulate that today? Do we want to build our society based on Roman morals, Roman norms, to continue to use slavery? Because the fact is that slavery exists in this world today. There are millions and millions of people living in slavery. How do we continue to allow that in an ethical society?